Leave him alone! Think he look up at me. Leave him alone! God damn it! Leave his fucking man alone!
Angelo Dundee was boxing's most famous cornerman and the trainer everybody loved. His calm voice guided legends through their biggest battles while cameras captured every moment. But behind that friendly smile were some seriously bitter conflicts that nearly destroyed his sanity. Working with superstars sounds glamorous until you discover the ego problems and manipulation tactics that come with fame. Dundee dealt with fighters who used him for credibility, then stabbed him in the back when convenient.
And Sultan's a heck of a fighter. I have no reason to say why the fight was so bad, but it was a bad fight.
Some treated him like a servant instead of the master strategist who made their careers possible. The Miami Beach scene attracted international fighters with complex political backgrounds and cultural differences that created constant tension. Dundee found himself caught between governments, exile communities, and media agendas that had nothing to do with boxing skills or athletic performance. Television cameras followed Dundee everywhere, turning private disputes into public spectacles that damaged his reputation unfairly.
He told Ray Leonard in front of his wife he was going to beat him up and then he was going to take his wife out.
Fighters learned they could manipulate media coverage to make Dundee look responsible for their failures while taking personal credit for all victories. These 6 fighters pushed Dundee past his breaking point through disrespect, manipulation, and outright sabotage of his professional methods. The #1 revelation will change how you view boxing's most celebrated trainer-fighter partnership forever. 6. Roberto Duran. Starting at number 6 is Roberto Duran, the Panamanian savage whose cultural arrogance and dismissive attitude toward American boxing methods infuriated Dundee throughout their brief partnership. Duran arrived in Miami with a chip on his shoulder about Latin American superiority. He constantly questioned Dundee's tactical suggestions and treated the legendary trainer like an inferior advisor. Language barriers created massive communication problems that Duran seemed to exploit deliberately rather than resolve professionally. Duran would pretend not to understand Dundee's instructions during training sessions. Then he would speak perfect English to reporters when it benefited his media image and promotional opportunities. Duran's wild lifestyle outside the gym conflicted completely with Dundee's disciplined approach to championship preparation and professional conduct. The fighter would disappear for days without explanation, missing scheduled training sessions and promotional obligations. Dundee felt disrespected watching Duran treat boxing like a hobby instead of the serious business that had made both men wealthy. The situation reached a breaking point when Duran's handlers started questioning Dundee's knowledge of Latin fighters and their unique cultural approaches. They suggested that Dundee couldn't understand the passionate fighting style that made Caribbean boxers different from American athletes. These attacks on his professional expertise insulted Dundee deeply. The infamous No Mas incident became the final straw when Duran's team blamed Dundee for not preventing the quit against Sugar Ray Leonard in their rematch. 5. Vinny Pazienza. At number 5 is Vinny Pazienza, the reckless Rhode Island warrior whose stubborn refusal to follow safety advice drove Dundee to question his own professional judgment and responsibility. Pazienza possessed incredible heart and determination, but lacked the common sense to protect his long-term health. Dundee watched helplessly as his student ignored every warning about dangerous opponents and risky fight selections. The trainer felt like he was enabling someone's path toward permanent brain damage. Pazienza would argue with Dundee constantly about accepting fights against devastating punchers who could end his career with one shot. The fighter believed his iron chin and warrior spirit could overcome any technical disadvantages or physical mismatches. Dundee tried explaining that courage without strategy leads to hospital visits, but Pazienza dismissed these concerns as cowardice. The stubborn attitude created tension in their corner relationship and public disagreements about fight preparation. Media criticism intensified when Pazienza suffered brutal beatings in fights that Dundee had privately opposed from the beginning. Boxing writers questioned why the experienced trainer couldn't control his fighter's reckless decision-making and poor opponent selection. Dundee felt unfairly blamed for outcomes he had predicted and tried to prevent through proper guidance and strategic planning. The breaking point came when Pazienza publicly questioned Dundee's protective instincts and suggested the trainer was holding him back from achieving greatness. This accusation devastated Dundee because he genuinely cared about Pazienza's welfare and future quality of life. The fighter's ingratitude towards someone trying to preserve his health represented everything wrong with boxing's macho culture and short-term thinking. 4. Jose Napoles. Number 4 brings us Jose Napoles, the Cuban welterweight, whose career became entangled in Cold War politics that made Dundee extremely uncomfortable with being used as a propaganda tool. Napoles arrived in Miami as part of the Cuban exile community during the height of political tensions between America and Castro's regime. The fighter's success was constantly framed through political narratives rather than athletic achievements. Dundee found himself caught between competing political agendas that had nothing to do with boxing strategy or corner work. Government officials and exile organizations pressured Dundee to make public statements about freedom and democracy using Napoles as a symbolic figure. The trainer preferred focusing on boxing techniques and fight preparation rather than becoming involved in international political debates. Media interviews constantly shifted toward political topics instead of discussing Napoles' athletic development and championship potential. Dundee felt manipulated by forces beyond his control who wanted to exploit his reputation for their own purposes. Cuban exile politics in Miami created additional pressure as community leaders demanded that Dundee publicly support their cause through his association with Napoles. The trainer worried that taking political positions would damage his ability to work with fighters from different countries and backgrounds. Dundee valued his reputation as someone who focused purely on boxing rather than getting involved in controversial political movements or ideological conflicts. The situation became unbearable when Napoles started making political speeches before fights, while Dundee stood silently in the corner. The trainer felt like he was being used as a prop in someone else's political theater, rather than respected as a boxing professional. This exploitation of their working relationship for propaganda purposes
expectations of a double champion fight
violated everything Dundee believed about keeping sports and politics separate. 3. Carmen Basilio. Number 3 is Carmen Basilio, the old-school welterweight veteran whose stubborn resistance to modern training methods created constant power struggles with Dundee throughout their partnership. Basilio had achieved success using traditional techniques and refused to adapt to newer approaches that Dundee wanted to implement. The generational gap between fighter and trainer created philosophical conflicts that poisoned their working environment. Dundee felt frustrated trying to improve someone who believed change meant admitting previous methods were inferior or outdated. Training sessions became battlegrounds as Basilio questioned every suggestion and modification that Dundee proposed for his fighting style. The veteran fighter would publicly argue with Dundee during workouts, undermining the trainer's authority in front of other gym members and media observers. Basilio treated Dundee like an inexperienced newcomer rather than respecting his growing reputation and proven track record with other successful fighters. These public disagreements damaged Dundee's credibility and made other potential students question his expertise. Strategic planning became impossible when Basilio refused to follow game plans that differed from his established approach to fighting opponents. The fighter would ignore corner instructions during actual bouts, making Dundee look incompetent to television audiences and boxing critics. Press conferences turned into debates about training philosophy rather than fight promotion, creating awkward situations for everyone involved in their partnership. The ego clash reached its peak when Basilio started giving interviews, suggesting that Dundee was trying to fix something that wasn't broken. This public criticism of Dundee's methods represented the ultimate disrespect from someone who should have appreciated the trainer's efforts to extend his career and improve his performance against elite competition. 2. Joe Frazier. Number 2 is Joe Frazier, the Philadelphia heavyweight whose bitter professional rivalry with Dundee went far beyond normal competitive tensions. Frazier's team constantly attacked Dundee through media interviews, questioning his boxing knowledge and experience with elite heavyweights. The Philadelphia boxing establishment treated Dundee like an outsider who didn't understand the brutal realities of heavyweight championship fighting. The connection to Muhammad Ali poisoned any possibility of a respectful relationship between Frazier and Dundee from the very beginning. Frazier viewed Dundee as part of the Ali promotional machine that had disrespected him personally and professionally throughout their trilogy. Every interaction became tainted by the assumption that Dundee was secretly working against Frazier's interests and sharing information with his most hated rival. Training camp espionage accusations flew constantly as Frazier's team claimed that Dundee was stealing game plans and tactical information. They suggested that Dundee's presence at boxing events was really intelligence gathering for Ali's future fights against Frazier. These paranoid accusations created an atmosphere of distrust that made normal professional interactions impossible between the camps. Personal insults about Dundee's boxing credentials became routine, as Frazier's handlers questioned whether a trainer who worked with dancers could understand real fighting. They portrayed Dundee as someone who only succeeded with flashy boxers who avoided serious competition. The Philadelphia versus Miami Beach boxing culture war turned into personal attacks on Dundee's authenticity and toughness as a corner man who understood championship-level violence. 1. Muhammad Ali.
You gotta remember one thing, if Roberto Duran spoke English, he'd be as great as Muhammad Ali. Great talent, great sense of humor.
And here we reach the most shocking revelation of all, Muhammad Ali himself, the superstar who made Dundee famous while simultaneously driving him to emotional exhaustion through constant manipulation and ego demands. Ali wasn't just difficult to manage. He was a master manipulator who used everyone around him for personal gain. Dundee became trapped in a toxic relationship with boxing's most demanding personality, someone who took credit for victories while blaming defeats on everyone else. The partnership looked magical from the outside, but privately Dundee struggled with Ali's need for constant attention and drama creation. Ali would deliberately ignore corner instructions during fights to prove his independence, making Dundee appear useless to television audiences. The fighters' public statements often contradicted strategic plans they had discussed, leaving Dundee looking confused and out of touch with his own student's approach. Ali's habit of undermining Dundee's authority became a constant source of stress and professional embarrassment throughout their decades together. The fighter would make jokes about Dundee's advice during press conferences, suggesting that his own instincts were superior to any tactical guidance. This public disrespect damaged Dundee's reputation, while Ali basked in the spotlight as a self-made genius who succeeded despite his trainer's limitations. The emotional cost of managing boxing's most difficult superstar nearly destroyed Dundee's love for the sport entirely. Ali's manipulation tactics and credit-stealing behavior represented the ultimate betrayal of someone who had devoted his life to making others successful. Dundee privately resented the man who made him famous but treated him like a disposable employee rather than a valued partner. From cultural clashes to superstar manipulation, these conflicts reveal the hidden cost of corner greatness. Which story shocked you most? Smash that like button and subscribe for more boxing revelations.